Because Ditsy's here with the papers, starting with a serious story. This is the Rohingya repatriation deal announced yesterday.
That's right. The reactions have been pretty skeptical to that deal. We've been looking at the Daily Star, which is a Bangladeshi newspaper, which reports that Bangladesh and Burma, also known as Myanmar, have agreed on a 2-year timeline to repatriate Rohingyas back to Burma. That could begin as early as next week. And under the deal, Burmese authorities would provide temporary accommodation and then eventually permanent housing. For the editors at the Guardian newspaper, however, it's a bad deal worsened by haste. They say refugees must not be forced to go back, given the tales of persecution that they've faced at the hands of the Burmese military. The Guardian says those responsible for that persecution must first be brought before justice, and they call for international donors to step up and encourage both sides to scrap or at least delay this agreement.
Another story for you now. Many people leaping to the defence of the Hollywood comedian and actor Aziz Ansari. This after he was accused of sexual assault.
That's right, and it's totally redrawn the parameters of the whole Me Too movement. Now, on the weekend, an anonymous woman penned a viral piece for a website called Babe. In it, she recounts how the Netflix star and self-professed woke feminist Aziz Ansari essentially ignored clear non-verbal cues during a date, sexually pressuring her and then breaking it off when she said no. For many, this is really more of what some say is revenge porn than sexual assault. And the story is essentially, as I said, redrawn the parameters of what is sexual harassment and whether we can clump what some call are bad date stories in together with years of institutionalized sexual harassment. Now, that's what the Chicago Tribune argues in this piece. They say that you cannot conflate what happened to Aziz Ansari with what happened to Harvey Weinstein and other Hollywood bigwigs. This user, at least in the Chicago Tribune, wonders if it was just a bad date.
Yeah, many people say this particular exposure even derailing perhaps the Me Too movement.
Well, that's according to the Daily Beast. They have a really interesting article talking about how this story really shows that the sort of discrepancies in younger generations and their approach to sex. And they also wonder if the Me Too movement has, quote, finally overreached with this story. While the conservative paper, the Washington Examiner, notes it's time for the Me Too movement perhaps to splinter off into two. So have two discussions, one about sexual misconduct and experiences of sexual misconduct, and the other one about what actually constitutes sexual misconduct. Let's talk about sexual politics, the writer says, but not in a way that blurs lines.
Now let's move on to an extraordinary report. This is about Wendi Deng, the former wife of Rupert Murdoch, who may or may not have been a Chinese spy.
And this is an extraordinary story. It's really crazy. It was first reported by the Wall Street Journal. U.S. officials were prompted to warn Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, about his and his wife Ivanka's friendship with the Chinese-born Wendi Deng, former wife of Rupert Murdoch. They essentially alerted him to the possibility that she may be using her friendship with them to spy for the Chinese. Wendi Deng, of course, divorced Rupert Murdoch 5 years ago amid accusations back then that she and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair were having an affair. I'll be danged, that's what the Washington Examiner says, casting doubt, really, that Deng could be a spy. Also noting that the Wall Street Journal, which broke the story, is, of course, owned by Murdoch's News Corp. So make of that what you will.
Amazing where these stories come from, isn't it? Now, here in France, Emmanuel Macron preparing to loan an 11th century tapestry to Britain.
Yeah, and it's not any old tapestry. It's the Bayeux Tapestry that's not left France for 950 years. The famous artwork that's made the front page of the British daily The Times is believed to depict the Norman conquest of Britain. The French say it was created in France. The Brits say it was created in Britain. Anyway, Macron has agreed to loan the tapestry, not give it, as The Times might suggest. It won't take place for another 5 years, though. The time needed to see if the artifact can withstand the test of travel.
Be interesting to see. And finally, we're going to stay with history for this next story. It's a scandal about Egyptian mummies, but they've got different daddies.
Yeah, that's right. It's actually a scandal about who's your daddy, one might say. The bodies of two priests exhumed back in 1907 in Egypt by a British archaeologist were thought to be brothers and dubbed the tomb of the two brothers. Well, now new DNA shows that they indeed had the same mother, but different fathers. So it's prompted a 4,000-year family scandal centered on whether or not their mother may have had a secret affair.
Secret stuff. Could do with a family tree. Thanks a lot, Daisy Tipsy, with the papers on France 24.